So, hi everyone, my name's Marjorie, and we have Megz Reynolds here.
Hi.
So can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I am originally from Calgary, grew up there, and I have now been grain farming for 5 years. But my background is in the film industry. I worked in Calgary and Vancouver in film after high school. So coming to the farm in rural Saskatchewan and learning how to be a farmer is a new adventure in my life.
Oh, nice. Well, you picked the right football team, the Riders.
So I hear.
So like you kind of briefly mentioned, you weren't always an ag.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us a little bit about that and kind of how the transition to ag was for you?
Yeah. So I always knew that I wanted to end up on a farm. I just never thought it would be in Saskatchewan.
Yeah.
And so coming out to the farm, it was good for the most part. Like I've really enjoyed everything that I've learned, and I kind of dove in head first. Like I learned how to run all the equipment. I learned how to work on the equipment. Helped make seeding plans, and I was really lucky that I came into a family that supported me to find the role that made me happy. And my husband, same way. I wasn't just kind of, okay, this is the role that we expect you to take on. So that part of it was good, but I think what I struggled with the most was the isolation of coming to the farm. And I don't just mean that in regards to coming to a community that has a smaller population than my graduating class in Calgary, but isolation in the fact that becoming a farmer and what I was going through or struggling with as a farmer was a lot different than anything my friends could really relate to. And so I felt isolation in that I couldn't communicate my stresses, or I didn't feel understood when I was trying to communicate them. And I think that is what I struggled with the most, and I still do. It's still a struggle that I have.
Yeah, because it's definitely different to kind of hear about it than to actually be there and be living it. Yeah. So like you mentioned, like farming can be stressful. In fact, farmers have the highest rate of suicide than any other industry. Can you explain to us, for kind of like the non-A group, what are those stressors? What is it like to be a farmer, and what's causing that?
I think probably the biggest one is that what we need to succeed in farming, weather is the main one, is 100% out of our control. So there's a lot of instability created that what we need to be successful, we don't get to control. Same with commodity prices. Those are, we get to pick who we broker our grain through, but pricing is set based on world events, also world weather events, out of our control. You have very busy seasons, seeding, spraying, harvest, and during those times you have a set window in which to get things done. And so you are not sleeping a lot during that time. You're really not looking after yourself because everything else is coming first, and you're not spending that much time with your family. So I think that all of that just adds to increased stress or any anxiety that you might be feeling. And then, just the fact that it is just such a different career, and there's that disconnect. And then we have that internal stigma in farming that we need to be tough. And we can't show emotion, or we can't talk about it, and that only adds, I think, to struggling by yourself.
Like you mentioned, with isolation and stuff, you've kind of have found an outlet through social media, and you were very vocal about your mental health. What kind of led you to do that, and what are some benefits that you got out of it?
Well, for me, I found that a way for coping or processing was to write. And so I started to do that through blogging. And in 2016, we had a really rough year. And like I said, I'm new to farming, so that was kind of my first experience of how bad things can get. And we had a ton of rain, so our crops were full of disease, and then we had a hailstorm come through right before harvest that kind of wiped our crops out. And we kind of struggled through harvest. We got our crops off. Prices were not good. We were trying to figure out how to sell crops that were basically, it was either find a buyer or burn them. And it just kept building up, and we got to the point where we had our third insurance that we were kind of relying on, and they didn't pay out. And I kind of snapped at that point and processed it by writing a blog post about kind of where I was at mentally and what we were dealing with, because we had just had a conversation up late because we weren't sleeping about how we both felt like we had failed, that we couldn't provide for our families, and that we were only worth our life insurance policies. And that's a horrible conversation for a husband and wife to have, and I don't think it's one that, I know that it's not one that no one else has had. I know people who have had the same conversation, and so I think for us to be able to have that, and then for me to be able to talk about it publicly, it helped both of us because we stopped, I think, blaming ourselves when realizing the other one wasn't blaming us. And then to put it out there and to say, hey, this is what I'm going through, and to have other people reach out to me and say, I've been there and I've come out the other side. That was a huge help for me. And then just to kind of ramp that up where I made connections through that sometimes it's easier to talk to someone not in your community, especially in rural communities where everyone wants to know everyone else's business. So to be able to, through social media, reach out and talk to someone that is a safe place, and maybe you've never met them before, and that's okay, right? But you get to have those conversations because they understand you and they've been through what you're going through. But it's a safe place to talk. It really kind of
breaks that barrier of isolation.
It does, yeah.
And I think one thing that we always forget about is when you're a farmer, you are your own business owner. And I mean, with farming, like you mentioned with the weather and that, you have no control of the outside where other industries do. So that's really... Yeah,
it's fairly risky. I don't think there's a lot of investors that would be like, hey, I'm all for that business plan. I'm going to give you all this money, and you may or may not get a return in 5 or 6 months on it. So
yeah, that's definitely a tough one to sell. So to anyone that might be suffering out there, what's kind of some advice that you would give, and what are some resources that they can use?
I think the most important thing to remember is that you're not alone. You're never alone. There's other people going through what you're going through, or that have been through what you're going through. And I think we need to realize that when we talk about stigma and mental health in ag, some of that isn't just on how others will take us opening up. It's on us feeling like we can't start the conversation. And I think there's a lot of times where people are more receptive to having a conversation if you need to talk than we think. And so some of that I think is on us to be able to reach out. And there's always, whether that's through social media, there's always someone that will talk. And sometimes, like, if you are the person who someone wants to talk to, if you don't know what to do or you don't know what to say, just being able to listen. Like, if you can just listen, that is a huge help. DoMore.Ag Foundation just launched, which I think is going to be revolutionary for the agriculture industry, and hopefully a starting point to take that globally, because it's not just Canadian ag that is suffering, it is globally. It's a problem everywhere with farmer suicides and stress levels. In Saskatchewan we have the farm helpline that you can phone to, but I think if you're just able to reach out or find an outlet, if there's something bothering you, be able to identify things that maybe you need to walk away from. If it's something in your control that you can walk away from that is going to ease your anxiety or your stress load, then try to step back from that.
Yeah, and like if you are out there, please feel free to direct message us if you don't know where to go right now. So one thing that we didn't really touch about is the stigma. As people, as myself even, and other people that are not directly in the ag community, what are some things that we can do to help and kind of break that?
I think what we've seen in the last month with the conversation being picked up on so many levels, that is huge. Like the fact that we're sitting here talking about this, that media has been carrying on the conversation. If we can keep that conversation going, I think that will do a lot to break down doors. And also how you react to it, right? Like that's a big part. If someone can communicate and you can take that positively, or you can deal with them communicating in a healthy way and not be negative about it on social media or call someone out because they've opened up about something, then that's a really important aspect, because we have seen that negativity, especially online, with people trying to open up.
It's often easy to be a bully online when you aren't seeing a person in front of you. Yeah.
So I think if we can keep the conversation going, if we can be respectful to those people that are communicating and wanting to talk, then I think that will do a lot to help just people feel more comfortable and to hopefully break down those walls.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your story and
Well,
kind
thanks
of
for
sharing
having me.
with me.
Yeah.
Awesome.